right, hello everyone, and welcome to the Jackson Women's Summit meeting. My name is Ginger Whatley, and I will be moderating today's call. We have a great team of speakers today, and we will turn to the presentations in just a moment, but first I want to go over the web conference instructions. Everyone is currently on mute, so the background noise does not become distracting for the other participants. To view today's presentations as the screens change live, please use the link that was sent to you in your email yesterday. Once in there, click anywhere on the page. You'll see a pop-up option to make a comment. Feel free to ask questions by clicking on any slide, and we will make sure your questions are answered. For the newer participants in this group, it might be good to go over some of the web conference instructions, or some of the benefits we have today. First, there are live monthly web conference meetings, one of which you're dialed into today. We hope you find these useful, and we have an excellent lineup, which you can see by going to our website schedule page. Second, we record all of these meetings, so if you're traveling or stuck in another meeting, you can log in at your leisure, and the full archives of past meetings are available to you with a number of interesting topics. Third, we want you to get to know other members. By logging in, you can see their profiles, and we are glad to make any introductions if wished. Fourth, if you're wrestling with any key issues or decisions, we strongly encourage you to reach out to the other members at our site. Our site makes it easy to post questions. You'll find that the seniority and experience of your fellow members makes this a great forum to get advice from others who have probably dealt with the same issues and can give you sound advice on what worked and what didn't. Fifth, we generate executive summaries from each meeting with the key takeaways and learning nuggets so that you can reference them after the meeting and put them into action. Sixth, we know our members are busy, so we started a service where we pick 6 of the most interesting articles among thousands of articles at hundreds of sites to keep you up to date on key learnings. Next, we encourage you to find a mentor. Please go to the site and you can reach out to some of our senior executives who'd be glad to serve as your mentor. And last, check out our Book of the Month summary. You can either read or listen to these books, and each month we'll be selecting the most interesting book and then summarizing the ideas within minutes so you can absorb the key takeaways. There are many other benefits, but we just want to highlight some and notify you to keep a lookout for them. So that takes care of all our housekeeping items.
Okay, well, my name is Angie Everett, and I am the Vice President of Post-Acute and Rehabilitation Services at North Mississippi Medical Center. I provide oversight to 42 departments, 900 employees across acute outpatient home, clinic, and long-term care sites for North Mississippi Health Services. I live in New Albany. I have a bachelor's degree in social work from Mississippi State and a master's from University of Southern Mississippi. And I'm just most excited to be here. I'm sad that I can't see all your faces. I mean, I have to say that I get oxygen and energy from seeing faces and smiles and nods and amens, and I'm sad that I'm not able to see all your faces today, but I'm so grateful to be able to join you all.
Oh, well, thank you for being here with us. Yes, I didn't realize that I actually like putting makeup on sometimes, so sometimes I'm sad that I don't get to take an extra moment to dress up for everybody. Well, Angie, I'm going to pull your slides up. And we're excited to have you, so I will control the slides from my end. So just say next slide when you'd like me to go to the next slide. So thanks for being here with us today.
Okay, I sure will. And I have a lot to cover, but I'm a fast talker.
We are okay on time, so thank you.
Okay, good. But you all feel free to ask questions through the chat or however that would work best. But really today, what I want to really focus our time together, it's really a conversation. I want to it's sort of like I have this vision. I'm sitting in my office, and I really kind of have this visual that you all are just sitting in here with me. It's just a time, I really think about our time together as just a time of rest, a time to focus on you, a time for us to have some dialogue and a conversation around how can we become women of influence, which for me and my leadership journey, and I'm going to talk about that in just a second, but for me, my leadership journey has been nothing more than how can I create more influence? How can I influence the people around me? How can I influence change? How can I influence that's the bottom line. So that's really what I'm going to lean into today around my talk. And I'm thankful for the opportunity to be able to share my thoughts. Line muted. Some tools that I've picked up that have helped me in my 31-year journey and in becoming a woman of influence. So you can go right on to the next slide. So my story, I will not bore you with a lot of details, but I will tell you that my career began 31 years ago as a social work student here at North Mississippi Medical Center, and I have been in the role of vice president for the past 6 years, and it has been a very wonderful journey of opportunities and relationships along the way that have changed me and have given me the opportunity to change some things around me. And it's been really a blended work of failures and blessings and struggles and luck and being in the right place at the right time with the right people. And some of my advancement here at North Mississippi Medical Center has been intentional, and some of it has been by chance, and some of it has been a leap of faith. But all of that was building up to the experience that I had over about a 19-month period in 2019 going into 2020, where I had the crazy opportunity and experience to be a part of what is called the Carol Emmett Fellowship, which is a legacy of Carol Emmett founded in San Diego, California. And you can Google it and look it up. I was able to go through a 19-month intensive fellowship with 18 other women across the country that's specifically designed to break down barriers and accelerate the leadership capacity of women in healthcare, because we are outnumbered by men by a long shot. So I'm going to just share some of that wisdom and enlightenment with you all today that I've learned in my journey to becoming a woman of influence. So you can go on to the next slide. When we think about our why, okay, why do we do this? And if you think and you kind of settle in and rest in that question, why does what I do matter? What am I passionate about? Leading is hard, and I will tell you that leadership for women is not for the weak. Leading in a pandemic has brought out things in me I did not even know I had. A part of the human existence is we need to belong, we want to have purpose, and we want to be a part of something greater than ourselves. And Oprah wrote this book called What I Know for Sure, and she was interviewed very early in her career, and someone asked her, what do you know for sure? And she stumbled over the answer. And that troubled her so that she actually wrote a book on all the things that she knows for sure. And I love thinking about collecting thoughts and ideas and what is it that I know for sure. Change is what has sort of been my purpose, I think. What has motivated me to lead and lead boldly is how can I create change? When I think about as a woman, as a mentor, as a sister, a friend, a wife, a good partner in the workplace, I think about how can I help influence and create change, not just for myself and for my environment, my departments, my employees, but for the experience for our patients and our customers. And when we think about change, we can either fight it, we can adapt to it, embrace it, create it, or lead it. And I'm going to talk about that in 3 contexts just real briefly. So on the next slide, you can see that when change hits out of nowhere, and it's funny because I've given this talk in a different variety over the last couple of years, and that was the last time that I had this conversation. It was certainly we had not experienced a pandemic. So when I think about the first thing when change hits out of nowhere, unexpected, and we don't have control, and we think about now what? I did not sign up for this. We certainly did not know that a pandemic that would cross our whole planet was around the corner. And when we think about change and how we respond, our first is 3 things. The first being respond to change. Change happens either someone, something or something of nature happens and change hits, there's a call for us to be nimble and agile, especially when I think about not just in the healthcare environment, but across all spectrums of business and work, is responding by being nimble. In the next slide, when we think about navigating through change, is the next notion, responding first and then navigating through. Change is expected and anticipated, and how do I assist and help others to navigate through change? And I believe, and I've experienced very firsthand, I believe there is a grief or a change reaction to across a continuum. And if you'll go to the next slide, this is how I describe it. So in 2006, we made the decision to close one of our pieces of our business. And I can remember I had been a part of that decision process. And I can remember the first time we began at the executive leadership level to have that conversation, my first, of course, reaction was, oh, no. And then I began my grief process and my continuum of responding and navigating through that great change. But by the time I got to the employee level and to the employees to have that conversation, I had to remember that even though I was already now at let's go, well, I'm ready, we know what to do, this is how we're going to handle this, they were still at oh no. So as leaders, we have to be sensitive in knowing that in this change response continuum that our employees are at a different place than we are. And sometimes that's not just our employees, it's our kids, or it's our spouse, it's our partners. It's understanding and knowing how to help others navigate through change by understanding this response to change continuum. And the third is being a creator of change. And if you go to the next slide, this is why we all do what we do, is to help not only just have a good, solid response to change, having discernment about our next steps in navigating and assisting others to navigate change, but what is it that I can do to create a way for change? To be an agent for change, a warrior, a courageous leader, that is not easy. And, you know, you also have to think about, I'm going to fail, I'm going to succeed, what am I going to do, how am I going to go forward, I'm going to have to try it, risk it, and how can I ultimately thrive, not just survive, but thrive in the midst of change. You can go to the next slide. I love this slide. And I don't know about if you all cook, but cooking has like become my safe haven. It's like my sanctuary. When I get into my kitchen after work and I begin to cook, or on the weekends, I have teenagers and I love to feed them. It's like my love language. Cooking is my thing that I do to take me out of my whirlwind. And when I think about cooking and following instructions, there is no recipe for women in their journey to becoming an influential leader. But I do believe that there are tools, there are applications, there are that if we feel, we look, we tuck them away, we collect them and systematically apply them, I believe that we can overcome any gap that we have as women and master them and become women of influence and women of change. So if you go to the next slide, what I'm going to go through, I'm going to try to go through these briefly. Y'all slow me down if I'm talking too fast. But I believe there are five things that I believe have been the most impactful for me in leading and being a woman of influence and thriving in change in a predominantly male environment. And one of those, the very first one, and it's so important, is how do I learn to think and act in a complex system? It's not just I can't just get comfortable about just thinking and acting in my lane. How do I think and act in this complex highway this fast-moving 15 lanes of hills and curves and detours in a complex system. It's vitally important. The Center for Creative Leadership is a part of the sponsor program for the women for the Carol Emmett Fellowship, and it outlines in a white paper about a whole system approach to leadership in 3 things. And we're going to go to the next slide, and it's around direction, alignment, and commitment. And I love this slide because it tells us that this whole system approach in thinking and acting in a complex system is we all have to know where we're going. And that's the direction. What is it and where is it that we hope to get to? We have to have clear, defined plan on, if we're going to have a plan on where is it that we're going. And alignment is, how are we going to get there? How can we all agree that this is how we're going to get there? And then commitment is making sure that everybody that we have on board with us, they're all rowing the boat in the same direction. I don't know if you know or if you've been there, but I've been there where I felt like we knew where we were going and we had great alignment. Everybody knew how it was that we were going to plan to get there, but we had one person in the boat who wasn't rowing in the same direction as the rest of us. And it caused that boat to tilt, turn, create disruption. And I believe that as leaders, having this whole system approach and understanding and knowing and getting buy-in across these 3 things is very, very important. And my goal here in working to be a woman of influence is, how can I build a team that can consistently identify the forces at work in every circumstance and leverage a comprehensive view so that we're wise, making wise and effective decisions and actions so that we can all get there together, rowing the boat in the same direction and reach our destination. In the next slide, the other thing around that I think is very important when we think about thinking and acting in a complex system is this idea, and I did take some pictures of some books that have been very, very awesome for me, that are like the ones I pull off the shelf most frequently, and one of them is this book, Polarity Thinking, and it's the missing logic to achieve healthcare transformation, but it works in any setting. And it's the thing about this polarity thinking and having influence and understanding is that it's about problem solving. And how can we stop problem solving and start developing problem solvers around us? And that was a very different concept for me, because I'm one of those people, you come to me with a problem, I'm going to start trying to figure out how to bring a solution. And reeling that in and being more curious, asking more questions, and beginning to develop around me a group of people who are problem solvers instead of bringing it to me to solve has been like this fantastic leap for me, and it's brought about great change within me and within the team. So polarity thinking is this concept that there can be 2 opposing opinions, and neither one of them are right or wrong, but they complement each other when we apply them in the middle. So our job when this happens, when you've got 2 people or 2 camps who have polar opposite thoughts, decisions, opinions, solutions, that it's not our job to go to either one of those solutions, but that we figure out how to bring both of those folks with their polar thinking to the middle so that we have problem solvers and we're not solving the problems for them. So all of this is around complex thinking and acting in a complex system. So then we'll go to number 2, which is the next slide. And I love this one too. I mean, y'all, these are like equally important, is leveraging your networks for growth and impact. And this is just simply building a network of champions. Nobody succeeds on their own. And I will say that by nature, we're all connected. So when it comes to our leadership success, there's always going to be someone who has influenced you in some way along your journey. They may have provided advice, acted as a role model. Some of mine that I remember, I chuckle when I think about this, but it's the truth. Some of my worst bosses have given me the most intel about how not to be. Can I get an amen? So when you think about that you're shown the ropes, when you took a new job, you believed you could do it when you didn't, you were introduced to the person who offered you your next opportunity, nobody succeeds on their own. And one of the best books that I've read that addresses mentorship is this next book on the next slide, and it's called Kick Some Glass. I actually got to hear this author speak, and she describes 3 different kinds of people we need to get in our camp. And it's not just mentors. It is mentors, but it's not just mentors. It's also sponsors, and sponsors make me awkward. And I'm going to get there in just a minute. But mentors, sponsors, and then members. And it creates this vision of building what I call your own board of directors. So that Angie Everett has her, not at work, but for her own personal, professional journey to become a woman of influence, that I have a board of directors that's made up of, you can go to the next slide, that's made up of folks that are helping me in an operations sense in my life, in a personal sense, and a strategic sense. And the next slide comes directly when I heard the author of Kick Some Glass speak. She gave us, she provided this very wonderful comparison of how a mentor is different than a sponsor. And I'm not going to read those to you, but you go through those. I'm going to say that a mentor is someone who is thinking about my career and development regularly and is willing to give me direct, constructive, and honest feedback. It's somebody I trust that can watch me in a meeting and afterwards say to me, okay, Angie, when you said this, this is how this was interpreted. It's somebody I trust that can tell me the hard stuff that I have a hard time hearing. A sponsor is different and way beyond a mentor. And a sponsor is someone that plays an additional role by advocating for developing you. They are important for men, but are critical for women's success. And research suggests that women are over-mentored and under-sponsored. As women, we should all have both male and female mentors and sponsors. Someone that's saying to me, Angie, I'm going to sponsor you. And that sponsorship may be that in a meeting where I am up against the masses, will endorse me out loud. So when you think about a mentor being someone that's personally speaking into you, and a sponsor, they're personally speaking out for you on your behalf. The third important thing, so first is thinking and acting in a complex system, and second is building your network of champions. The third is going to be, and this is where we get personal on this next slide, is using an authentic presence and a recognizable voice. And we convince people, and I'm going to go even further to say influence with our presence. And I'm going to talk just a second about this because I think it is so important. So when we think about impressions, so I've made an impression on you all. I made an impression on you all within seconds of opening my mouth. We make impressions of every person with whom we interact. We convince by our presence. Authentic presence is something else entirely. And this definition is get out of the way of yourself so that you can be yourself. And if you go to the next slide, if you haven't read this book, if you've not heard anything, a podcast or anything, or heard Brene Brown speak, I highly, highly recommend it. This book, The Gifts of Imperfection, she speaks a whole lot about using your authentic voice and having a recognizable voice and authentic presence. She describes it as the daily practice of letting go who we think we are, supposed to be, and embrace who we are. And it's taken me 30 years, I will tell you, to find myself in a place where I can even recognize when I am and when I am not being my authentic self. Brene Brown, she's a social work professor, a researcher, a writer. She describes choosing authenticity as this: cultivating the courage to be imperfect and vulnerable. I'm going to tell you the first time that with your team, you admit a failure, a fault, be human, vulnerable, and imperfect, you will influence them in ways that you will never imagine. Exercising the compassion for yourself that comes from knowing that we are all made of strength and that we all struggle, and I believe that we can experience joy and discomfort and struggle all at the same time. And nurturing the connection and sense of belonging that can only happen when we believe that we are enough. And when we begin to believe that we are enough and that we take our space at the table and we use our authentic and a recognizable voice at the table, we will begin to influence like we've never imagined we would. On the next slide, this is another book I would recommend to you. It's actually just called Presence. I also have met and gotten to know Amy Cuddy, the author of this book. She was very involved in the Carol Emmett Fellowship on a couple of our training sessions. And I will tell you that this book hit me right between the eyes. If you saw my book, it's like riddled with sticky notes and highlights. There's so many things about this book that I could resonate with. And she talks about having a recognizable voice, and that is when you use your authenticity and presence to bring your voice to the table. And it's not always the loudest, but it is the most informed. And she also talks a lot about thought leadership and how your voice, your presence, leaves a footprint. And it's not just in how you speak, but how you write, your social media, your body language, your posture, your gesture, everything that makes up your full self. And how can I create momentum toward making my voice recognizable for influence? So that's number 3. So it's creating, being authentic and creating a recognizable voice. And then the 4th is, and this is where I think for women, this is probably one of the most important. And on the next slide, we're going to talk just a minute about how can we gather all kinds of power and our stories for good and for influence. How can I be thoughtful and versatile in exercising power to make things happen? So you have to understand and know we all have power. Knowing what power you have, owning what power you have, using it for good, being aware of it, learning how to leverage the power, mostly the power in your relationships, is very, very important when we think about influencing. And speaking up and learning how to use your voice and use the power in your voice for good. And in the next slide, this is also from a book called Radical Candor. And if you all are not familiar with this notion or this approach or understanding how and what box you fall into naturally, it's very important. Because when you think about this, this quadrant here, when we look at ruinous empathy, which is in the top left corner, that's when I behave as if I care, but I do not speak up. Now, I'm just going to let that sink in because I'm going to tell you all that it took me a hot minute. I had to read it about 3 times. Literally, you are empathetic in a ruinous way when you behave as if you care, but you do not use the power of your voice to speak up. In the bottom left quadrant is manipulative insincerity. And that's when you do not say anything and you behave as if you do not care. And in over to the right, this obnoxious aggression is if I speak up and behave as if I do not care. And our goal and what we want to get to is that upper right quadrant called radical candor, and that's where I do both things. I speak up and behave as if I care. And that's where we want to be. We want to be candor in a radical way in using our voice. And then the fifth thing, and this is the last one, is the last slide, is knowing yourself in order to build a legacy. So if you could go to the next slide. So I'm going to tell you all, this one's tough. So, and this is where, go back to the next, go back to the slide, go to the slide before it. So I'm going to talk, I want to hang out just here for just a second. No, go back to the next one. You were right. Go to the number where it says number 5. There it is. Okay, just hang out here for just a second. So here is where we all have to do the hard work, and this is my passionate part, the hard work of looking in the mirror and getting to know ourselves. So in going through the Carol Emmett Fellowship, probably the most difficult thing for me was all of the self-evaluation and introspection that was required of us. And not just learning about it, but learning to be comfortable with it, sharing it out loud in order to fill in the gaps and create change. And I'm going to share a little bit of mine with you in the spirit of transparency. So first of all, I am an ENFJ. I'm an extrovert, intuitive, feeling, judging. I'm described as an idealistic organizer, and at my worst, I go silent into my thoughts. I'm a number 3 on the Enneagram, which is the achiever, and there's a lot of things about being a 3 on the Enneagram that's very embarrassing. It says my basic fear is being worthless, and my basic desire is to feel valued and worthwhile. My DISC profile says that I'm an influencer with a tail to dominant. My Hogan HPI says I value interpersonal sensitivity, but I am not inquisitive. The Hogan MVPI says the environment I strive to create is aesthetics, creative self-expression, and how products of work look and feel are most important to me. How well do you know you? And how willing are you to do the hard work to evaluate and assess where is it that who are you at your worst? I had 3 questions once asked of me. It said, how do other people see you? What do you think they get wrong? And how would you like to be seen differently? And I think that's the part to me that is so important in becoming a woman of influence. Now you can go to the next slide. And I've got here on this one, why is this so important to me and to us as women? And I've even titled this slide, What the What? So this is part of the banner that I wave around why I speak, why I mentor and sponsor other women around me, is that men make up 22% of the health workforce, but represent 72% of the board, 82% of hospital CEOs, and 92% of the CEOs at the top 100 hospitals. We can and should do better. And then the next slide is just mind-blowing. So the next slide says that there are more men named John and David than all the women on S&P 1500 boards. Again, we can do better. And so I will end today on the last slide with a quote from one of my mentors. And she is the president of Albert and Mary Lasker Foundation and the former CEO of UCD Health.
Line unmuted.
She's the dean of the School of Medicine there. But she says that Americans' health is at risk. And while needed changes in our healthcare system are underway, what is missing from the equation is the full participation of women. And I will advocate and mentor and speak and support women in every way possible in order for every table around the state of Mississippi that has the full participation of women, because I believe that that is the way forward. And that is it. And I was just 3 minutes late, 3 minutes over.
Oh, no, you were fabulous. That was a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much, Angie. So just a reminder, if anybody wants to ask a live question, hit 5-star and I'll unmute you. But I'm going to go to, I've got one question that is, I'm going to blend it because we've had a couple of questions come in about getting a mentor. And one comes from Addison and one comes from Amelia about mentors. So I'm going to combine it. And so can you give us some suggestions about getting a mentor, how to do it? And once you have it, what questions should you ask at a first meeting?
Oh, those are wonderful questions. And actually, in the Carol Emmett Fellowship, we had to have a full experience. We had to have 2 mentors, one local and one national, and 2 sponsors, one local and one national, so that we would get to experience firsthand what that relationship looks like, because those mentors and sponsors were trained in order to help us learn that. And it's been mind-blowing for me. My suggestion, first of all, on finding a mentor is, first of all, find who is that person that you trust. And if you want that to be a professional mentor, which that's, I mean, for me, I have personal and professional mentors and professional sponsors. So think about what is it that you want to achieve, first of all. Is it that you want to just become better in your current job? Is it or that you want a promotion or to have another job with more responsibility? You need sponsors and mentors, I would think, to do both of those things. But that will at least give you some direction of what is it that you want to obtain from your mentor and your sponsor. I would say to look around your organization. Who is somebody in your workplace environment that you look up to? I'm going to tell you that I remember the first time that, in my experience, that I raised my hand and asked someone to be my mentor. I was very nervous. I thought, this is going to be a burden for them. Oh, no. What if they say they would be delighted. It is such a vote of confidence. And now I'm on the opposite side of that. So when people, because I've preached this though, now people will ask me, Angie, will you be my mentor? Yes, I will be your mentor for 6 weeks. I will be your mentor. You want to have a defined period of time, but it is a delight to them. You are doing them a favor. Look around and see, who do you look up to? Who do you want to emulate? Who do you want to learn from? Who do you want to trust? And ask that person. As far as sponsors, the first place I would go is to my boss. I mean, my boss is the president of North Mississippi Medical Center. I told him from the very beginning of when I even learned about this concept, I would like for you to serve as a sponsor. This is what a sponsor does for me. And I would like for you to serve in that capacity, for you to advocate for me, for you to advocate for my areas, for you to advocate for me as a woman, for you to, and I gave him a list of things that a sponsor does that's different from a mentor, and it's amazing. And I'll tell you that you can also find other people outside of your comfort zone to be your sponsor or your mentor. Go on LinkedIn. Do a search of people that have that either have the job or some type of job or some achievement that you would like, and send them an email, a message, and ask them, would you be willing to be my mentor? I mean, a couple of my national mentors, we have a call every 2 weeks. With my local mentor, I may have coffee once every 2 weeks. It doesn't have to be someone that you that's local. I would even challenge women to have a mentor sponsor in their workplace that's not in their workplace, that's in some other industry that they could learn and grow from, and someone that's perhaps at a state or national level. And I'll offer this to you all. If there's anyone on the call that would like to reach out to me personally, I could give you some personal advice or guidance, or even be willing to serve as a mentor if you're interested. So that's my answer.
That's great advice. And you also answered our next question, which was from Kylie, who wanted to get you to kind of define the difference between a sponsor and a mentor. And I think one more time, and I think you did a great job. So thank you for describing it for us. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. I will say this, that on your first meeting in the questions, your mentor will help to lead and guide that conversation. If they understand and know the purpose of why you're seeking mentorship, they're going to help you to guide that conversation. Maybe it's to that you just want to get to know yourself better, and you want to give them examples of things that you've had happen and how could you see it differently. Or, maybe it's listening. How could you listen? Do an inventory and see where is it that you want to make changes or improvements, and let your mentor know that straight up, and your mentor will help to guide that conversation. I thought that as the quote-unquote student that I would have to lead that, and I was nervous about, oh no, what am I going to say? What if it's weird? What if it's awkward? It was never like that. The mentor, you choose a mentor, you tell them what it is that you want, they will help lead that conversation.
That's great advice. So I guess the last question before we wrap up, and we're going to ask you to give some final words of advice, and this comes from Trinity. And Trinity says, you've spoken about this program that you clearly got a lot out of. What was the catalyst to make you enter the program?
That was unbelievable, is all I know to say. So North Mississippi Medical Center has a partnership with a company called BDC Advisors that's out of Florida. They actually do some partnership work with us around strategy, visioning, strategic planning, long-range planning. Well, that company has a connection to the Carol Emmett Fellowship, and they do a lot of sponsorship of the Carol Emmett Fellowship out of Florida. And so this group approached our CEO of our system and said, we're willing to sponsor, because they were wanting to get more diverse across the country. Many of the women that I was in the third class of the Carol Emmett Fellowship. So there had only been two other fellowship classes before ours. And the first two, they were predominantly women on the West Coast and the East Coast. And they were wanting to have more diversity. And so the BDC advisor said, if you'll pick a woman from North Mississippi Health Services to enter the fellowship, we will pay for her $40,000 tuition. I mean, that's nuts. And so I'll never forget the day that my boss called me and he said, okay, BDC Advisors is willing to sponsor a woman into this fellowship. Would you be willing to go and do it? They probably thought she's the only crazy one that would say yes. And I had no idea what it was. I had to Google it. And when I Googled it, I was like, I had immediate imposter syndrome. I was like, oh my gosh, no, I can't participate with these women. I mean, if you all go on there and do a search and you can see all the women that were go into CEF3, which is the class I was in, I was like, oh my God, I can remember our very first meeting we were in Tucson, Arizona, and we had this mixer where we got to know each other. I was like, dear Lord, here I am. And I'm telling you, it was life-changing. And those women, those 18 that we have bonded, and I cannot tell you the things that we have done for each other in our careers, in our work, in our it's been revolutionary. But that's how it happened. It was totally by chance and totally unexpected. And I just responded with a yes, send me. I have no idea what it is. And it was a revolutionary experience for me and my journey.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you, Angie, for your time today. We really appreciate it. We do need to move on to our next panel, but we've got to ask you, just give us some final words of wisdom before we move on.
You've got this. That's all I've got to say, is you all have got this. And I have full confidence in every woman that's on the call. I wish I could see your faces, but you own your space and you use your voice and I have no doubt you're going to do great things and be women of influence.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
All right. Well, we are going to move on to our next panel, and I'm going to do a quick audio check with everybody to make sure they can hear me. Vanessa, are you on the line?
I'm on the line.
Okay. Lindsey, are you on the line?
Yes, I'm
Wonderful.
here.
And Vicki, are you on the line?
Yes, I'm here.
Wonderful. Well, Lindsey, let's start with you. Can you give us a self-introduction?
Absolutely. My name is Lindsey Hoskinson. I am the HR director for Rev Claims, and we're based here in Jackson, downtown. I have been in HR for almost 14 years. I'm from Madison, Mississippi, went to Mississippi State. I am also currently serving as the director-elect for the Mississippi SHRM State Council, and have been involved in various roles in the local HR chapter here. It's also called KIRA. And anyway, I'm excited to be here, and I'm honored that y'all asked me to be a speaker.
All right, well, thank you for being with us today. Vicki, I'll go to you next. Can you give us a self-introduction?
Sure. I'm probably the old one among the group. I started my career in banking in 1972, and I worked my way through various departments, and I've been here, well, I've been in this bank since 1974, and I love banking. I have worked my way into a lot of civic jobs. I love serving the community and trying to do good in our community, and it's just a sort of a focus I've had in my life for the last 20 years.
Well, thank you for being with us today. And we will end with Vanessa, with you. Can you give us a self-introduction?
Sure. My name is Vanessa Lou Garcia. I've been with the Mississippi Department of Human Services for about 5 years. I am not originally from Mississippi. I grew up in Germany and am a transplant here, and have a 2-year-old daughter and enjoy working for the state.
So, Vanessa, you are a little muffled. Are you on speaker?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you hear me better now?
Okay, give me one more audio check.
Can you hear me now better?
It's still a little muffled.
Okay.
That's better.
Is it better now?
That's better, yes.
Okay.
All right, so we're going to dive into the questions. And I'm going to give this question to Lindsey and to Vanessa. So, Lindsey, let's start with you. It's crucial that we understand our own strengths, weaknesses, talents, and biases. Which of those do you think is most important in building your value?
Well, I think that's a great question, and I think that, the two most important things that I picked from that, or that I think is the most important for building your value, is just your weaknesses and biases. I think it's certainly important for you to be familiar with your strengths and know what you bring to the table, but, if you're not in tune with your weaknesses and your biases, then how are you going to learn and grow and be better? I think when it comes down to demonstrating your value, of course, that's when you really want to show off your strengths and your talents, but you should also always be prepared to, be able to identify the areas that you're trying to work and improve in. So, I think back on interview questions when I'm interviewing candidates, and, a standard interview question that you see a lot is, what's your biggest weakness? And, I really like to phrase that question in a different way and ask a candidate, what are your challenges and what are you doing to overcome those challenges?
Oh, that's very well said. And also good, listen to that. That's a great question for all of us to kind of, when we're going through the interview process, to think through. So, Vanessa, I'll follow up with you on that question. It is crucial that we understand our own strengths, weaknesses, and talents and biases. Which of those do you think is most important in building your value?
I agree with what was said earlier. I believe it's essential to know your strengths and weaknesses, and also continuing to educate yourself and learn. We're all continuing to learn and bringing everything that you're learning that's new to your team or your group. And I also think that sometimes your team members may be stronger in some areas, and you can learn from them, and you may have to lean on them, and the same thing for, them. So I think it's just important to hold a mirror to yourself and know that, everything, it's important to grow and in order to move forward with your career.
Oh, very well said. Thank you. So as we move on to our next question, I'm going to ask this question to all three of you. And Vicki, I'll start with you on this question. What do you see as your most important individual accomplishment, one that has positively affected your organization's future, and would you discuss why it was the most important?
Well, I go back a long ways in answering this question because I've had such a long career, and you look deep into the well and you see what started my journey. I passed the Series 7 exam, which is for a broker, which everybody knows, the brokerage world has long been male-dominated. And I was scared to death to do it. But anyway, I took the challenge up. I took the Series 7, and there was a 20% pass ratio at the time. And I anticipated, having to take that test like 3 or 4 times. And, all I can say is God put an angel on my shoulder, and I passed it the first time. And anyway, what that did for my career, our bank later had some challenging times, and my boss recognized that based on my ability to take that test and pass it, that maybe I had some skills that could be used during that time. And he let me do basically a reorganization plan, or, help come up with a way to come out of that for our institution. And then that later led him to nominate me to go to a leadership school. And that led to me helping multiple organizations in our community and the bank as well. So to me, that was my most important individual accomplishment that led to the journey I'm on.
Oh, well, thank you for sharing that. And Vanessa, I'll follow up with you. What do you see as your most important individual accomplishment? And why would you discuss, why is it the most important for you?
I would say my most important accomplishment currently is we've had a huge crisis with the Mississippi Department of Human Services. In 2019, we had an embezzlement case brought upon our former executive director. So couple that with the COVID-19, along with natural disasters that happened with the flooding and, hurricanes and different weather events. It's been a challenging year for us. So our team, or my boss, said, you know what, Vanessa, I'm going to task you with trying to get some information out that's positive and highlight the Mississippi Department of Human Services in a positive light, so we can try to retain our reputation, and that this was an act of one person along with all of the other stuff that was going on throughout the year. So I think just taking that on and being able to have a story in the media at least once or twice a month, and bringing our mentions and just the way that people looked at DHS in a positive light. We were trending in negative. We were trending negatively at like 20%, and we were able to bring it back up to like 70% within a year. So I think just being able to do that was a great accomplishment.
Oh, thank you. And Lindsey, I'll end with you on this question. What do you see as what is your most important individual accomplishment, one that has positively affected your organization's future, and why do you think it was important?
Well, I think I kind of go back to the Capital Area Human Resources Association that I am a member of, and one of the first meetings I went to, I just was not really impressed with the reception I received. I guess I had just moved back to Mississippi from Austin, Texas, and so I was really excited to meet some people that were in the same field as I was, and I just realized, like, at the first meeting, it was a little cliquey, and I had a hard time meeting people, and I decided then, I was like, you know what, I am going to join a committee and see how I can personally get involved with this organization, and I think I have some ideas that can make it better. So I joined the welcoming committee, which was very appropriate. I felt like they needed some help there, and anyway, that was really the first decision that I made to really get involved in this chapter, and that is not something that that I would normally do. I've always just kind of taken a back seat and things like that and thought, oh, that's just not for me. I mean, I want to attend the conferences and the workshops, but I certainly don't want to take any type of leadership role and something like that. But making that decision just kind of had a domino effect to where, the first few meetings I went to, hearing the president talk of the organization, and I thought, one day I think I want to be in that position. And so I joined the board as treasurer, ended up being on the board for about 6 years, and ended up being president for a year, and then led to my involvement with SHRM on the state level. And so, like I said, I'm currently the director-elect for that. And I was named HR Professional of the Year back in 2019, and I owe a lot of that to just the networking opportunities and my involvement in both of those organizations. And I really think all of that was triggered by that just initial decision that I made to get involved on just a small committee, to greet people at the door when they walk into those meetings each time.
That's wonderful. Yeah, it's great advice for all of us. I'm kind of in the same situation where some of my organizations I maybe have been with too long. But yeah, just get started on the first level, and you'll be surprised, like with everybody you can meet and what you can do.
Yeah. You just never know where it'll take you. I mean, just a small little decision, and it can have lasting effects.
Yeah, great advice. So for this next question, I'm gonna let's see, Vanessa. I'll start with you on this question. What advice can you give to someone who's looking to become a stronger leader in their organization, especially during a crisis? What are the first steps they should take?
Just getting your voice out there, especially this is a time I know a lot of people may seem like, oh, I don't want to put my hand up or say anything, but just taking that chance and letting people know that you are available, and our team works a lot collaboratively, so we like that kind of stuff. So communication is key. Just taking the time to check in and let somebody know, hey, I'm interested in this, and please give me the opportunity, and, be able to move forward and connect and share your insights. So I think that's important to have that kind of environment. I worked in a place that did not have that, but didn't give us the option to raise our hand or even bring anything to the table. But I think just taking that step and saying, hey, this is something that I'm interested in. Can you help me? How do I get to this point? I think is a great way to start.
Oh, thank you. And Vicki, I'll follow up with you on that question. What advice can you give to someone who's looking to become a stronger leader in their organization, especially during a crisis? What are the first steps they should take?
I would advise them to hone their skills and learn everything they can, and maybe go through leadership training and development. It is invaluable in my process of things, and I think Angie and her presentation pointed that out, how important that the fellowship she went to and what you develop and their skills. It's just you don't even realize that you're learning, but then when you get into a crisis mode, it just kicks in. It's like it becomes just instinct. And I've told people over and over again, leadership development and training for me, it developed me in ways that I didn't even realize until later. And then other people could see those leadership skills in you, and they will follow you in a crisis. They'll come to you for advice. And that's, you just, I guess, win friends and influence people.
Well said. Well, thank you. Well, for Lindsey, I'm going to move on to you for this next question. So, Lindsey, can you give us an example of a time when you successfully influenced a significant decision? If so, why do you think you were successful?
Sure. An example I have for that is the organization where I work had a strategic committee, and I was not a part of that committee. And my CEO had advised that he was just trying to keep the group small and had selected people that he felt would really, he was trying to not have a whole bunch of people on there just sharing different ideas when just for the purpose of this particular committee. He was just trying to keep the volume down, I guess. And so it was ironic because I was actually assisting CARA, the organization that I've referred to, on planning a strategic planning conference or workshop for organization and for non-members as well. And really the whole point of that workshop was to create a plan for creating a strategic plan for our organization, and then also to be able to take that back to our respective workplaces and do strategic planning with our management team. And so it was just interesting that we had this going on at work, and I wasn't part of the committee, but I was also on this planning workshop committee for strategic planning. And anyway, I attended that workshop, and I ended up going back and talking to my CEO and just kind of explaining the value of the workshop and what I had learned, and also just, again, trying to sell him on the fact that I wanted to be part of that committee and felt like that I would add some value to that team. And anyway, long story short, he ended up adding me to the committee, and not only that, I was able to present during a meeting shortly after that to help our company come up with our mission statement and vision. So it was a really interesting thing to be able not only to just be part of that committee, but to be able to lead the committee in setting such important things as a mission statement.
Oh, that's great. That's great advice. So for our next question, Vanessa, I'll start with you on this question. If you have relevant experience that would help support your company in a time of crisis, should you share it with leadership? If so, what is the best way to do that without being viewed as bragging or insensitive to the situation?
I think this is a great question for women, especially because, when you have a seat at the table and you're trying to communicate, and especially you're a woman, you may be a woman, a minority woman, that brings a lot of different situations that can arise. So I think just being able to share your knowledge and presenting it in a way that it shows that you have researched, what you're talking about, and then also getting your different perspectives can help, because a lot of, people think in different ways. So I think that's very important in showing that diversity and being equipped for any challenges that may arise as well. We like to, do different scenarios for different types of things. So this could possibly happen, this could possibly happen. So maybe bringing that to the table as well during the crisis, and just sharing your voice and the experiences that you may have had that could bring a lot of helpful information to the table.
Thank you. And Lindsey, I'll follow up with you on that question. If you have any relevant experience that would help support your company in a time of crisis, should you share that with leadership? If so, what is the best way to do that without being viewed as bragging or insensitive to the situation?
Yes, you should definitely share any experience that you have that could help your company in a time of crisis or not. I think any time. I think as an employee, regardless of what role you were hired for, you're always adding value to the company and to your position. And you were hired because you're qualified to do the job that you were selected to do. And so your company's, invested in you and want to hear how you can make the company better. And I think that if you fail to do this, it's a disservice to yourself, and you're missing out an opportunity to sell yourself to upper management. And I think there's different ways that you can do this. I think sitting down and having a one-on-one conversation with your manager is always a great idea. Of course, you could submit something via email to HR or have a meeting with HR. I definitely think it's important to speak up.
Yeah, that's great advice. Well, just a reminder, I'd love to have somebody ask a live question. Please, if you want to hit 5-star, I can unmute you to ask a live question. But I'm going to dive into some of the questions that we've gotten on the chat line. So the first question comes from Jennifer. And Jennifer says, what professional and career issues do you see in the future for our young women who are just graduating and being hired and onboarded remotely? What advice could you give them? And that's for anybody. What advice do you give to our people that are not even going into the office, but starting their first career?
Well, I think I'll just mention something really quick. Being on the side of in human resources, and we're constantly dealing with I think there's a lot of good things with working from home. I think there's also a negative aspect of it, and I always say working from home is a big responsibility, and just make sure that you're conducting yourself just as you would be if you're working in the office. I used to always, when I would I've done phone interviews in the past, and I would always wear a suit on the phone interview just because it would make me feel more confident. And so I think that even, and I'm not saying you have to dress like that when you're working from home, but, just keep in mind that it's easy to lose sight of the fact that that you're working for a professional organization or you're in a professional role when you're sitting at home and, in your living room, wherever it may be. So I would just suggest that, stay in touch with your management team. Try to find ways to be visible and just to keep your behavior and attitude professional at all times.
That's great advice.
And if I could add something too, I've been working remotely from home for almost a year now. So, I would just suggest, at the beginning it was sort of like, we'll just check in whenever we check in kind of thing. But the more it got into the pandemic, I would really focus on, setting up a time to speak with your manager, making sure that you're, contacting your team and, just trying to keep some kind of normalcy, because I think that's very helpful moving forward with everything. So if you're working remotely, that's definitely something that I would suggest, is making sure that you're always in contact with your team on a daily basis or even maybe every other day, so that you're in the loop, because sometimes they may forget about you if they're in the office or you're working remotely. There's different kinds of situations. And just letting them know that you're available too. So that would be one of the suggestions that I would tell you.
That's great. So
I concur with that.
So, Vicki, remind me, are you going into the office every day? It's been so long since pandemics, I can't even remember what we're doing with banking.
Well, our customers sort of want us to be here when they call, so I have not missed a day of work. Thank heavens I've been healthy through it all, but because truthfully we have had to think on our feet. Because we've had a branch close, or we've had so many different scenarios that we've had to adjust to as far as management and making sure that our customers, have someone to help them, but yet taking care of our employees. And we have a good many of them, and we're spread out over 14 branches, and we're sort of operate lean and mean anyway on a normal basis. So it's been real challenging, but you find out how strong you are and how you deal with a crisis.
Right. And so remind me, and I'm thinking of my 85-year-old father and not me. Were the branches always open? Were the lobbies ever closed, or were the branches always fully open?
No, we've had, I think most of the banks in the state had to go to just open up with drive-through at one point in time. I was on a conference call statewide with banking leaders, and I think almost every one of them closed their lobbies at one point when the state mandates began. But, they slowly opened, and I'm wanting to say that began probably in September. Okay. And we're very scared to do that, but we've always kept our drive-throughs open.
Right. I can't believe it's been almost a year now. It's unbelievable. So
It is.
Well, I think I have one more question from the chat, and then I'm going to ask everyone to give us some final words of wisdom. And this question comes from Lauren, and Lauren says, "What is the greatest challenge you had to overcome to get to your current position? Was there anything specific that you felt that helped you succeed?" And that's for anyone.
I think I've already addressed that. Banking, I've been in it a good while, okay? And when I first started out in particular, there were not very many women officers. And so, but you prove your value and you just keep, stay in front of them, showing your abilities to get the job done and whatever needs to be done. And, fortunately times have changed some, and there's a lot more women that are officers now. But it's definitely, learn what you can, show that you can, that you have more ability than just to, that you want to advance. I actually went to my boss and said, I do not want to stay where I am. I will only stay here if you, allow me to advance up the ladder. And anyway, sort of happened.
Oh, that's wonderful advice. Thank you. Well, ladies, I think it's about time for us to wrap for the day. So I'm going to ask everybody to give us some final words of wisdom. So, Vanessa, let's start with you. Any final words of wisdom for the group?
I would just tell everybody, take those opportunities that come around and take them and roll with them and own them. And, that can make a big difference and move the dial forward.
Thank you. And Vicki, I'll go to you next. Any final words of wisdom for our ladies on the line today?
I really believe that Angie gave them some excellent advice, and finding a mentor or sponsor would probably be top among them, and get that leadership training, and I think they can advance as much as they want to.
Wonderful, thank you. And Lindsey, we'll end with you today. Any final words of wisdom for the group?
Yeah, I think the only other thing I would just mention is, just don't be scared. I think that's the biggest thing. I think it's really easy for us to get stuck in our current roles and just be comfortable and just kind of treading water. And, I always say, ask for more. I mean, and if you have ideas, speak up and voice those. My husband always says, you're already at no. So, the worst thing they can tell you is no. But I share with our employees here, if people are asking you to do more things, it's because you're doing the current things that you're doing well. And so just take that as a compliment. And, just don't be afraid. Speak up.
Thank you. Well, ladies, thank you so much for your time today. We want to thank all our speakers, both our panel members and our keynote speakers, and thanks to all our listeners as well. Without all of you, these events would not be possible. So for the participants on today's call, thank you for your continued support and insightful questions for our speakers. Let's all continue to support women's leadership and learn from one another. So please be safe, be kind to yourselves and each other, and be well. So until next time, this is Ginger Whatley signing off. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
You've allowed